Tables turned, Russian resistance crossed the border and humiliated and destroyed Putin's beloved FSB officers. At the same time, Putin himself, he continues to sacrifice even more Russian people just to buy himself a little bit more time, and at this point Russian soldiers, they simply refuse to follow orders. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get right to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. So, I know you probably already heard about this, but it was so many requests from you guys to react to this news from me personally. But we have one of the main propagandists, Margarita Simonyan, who said that let's threaten the West by detonating a nuke on the territory of Russia, somewhere in Siberia. According to her, in some way this should send a message to the West and to those filthy Americans. But I mean, what about actual people of Siberia who live on those territories? Doesn't she think about them? Wouldn't they be directly affected? Just for her to send a message. I mean, she does not even look like a smart person. After all, she's just a propagandist. But this is just a next level of being blind with hatred that you don't even care about your very own country. And all you care about is to spread this poison of hatred, dissatisfaction, and just don't even get me started there. Truly pathetic. We even have this saying in Russian which goes something as following: hit your own so that the others will fear you. And I think this is a perfect explanation what was going through her head, and she kind of basically wanted to show strength to the world but ended up in a big clown ship. So all I can say is that congratulations, you played yourself. But I'm also just curious about you guys. What do you think? What is the probability, or what's the percentage that Russia will nuke itself just to teach a lesson to the West? Please let me know in the comments. And speaking about the percentages, you already know what time is it, because 47.9% of you guys are still not subscribed to the Russian Dude channel. And yes, I'm talking specifically to you, Bob, Tom, Timothy, Richard. Just go ahead. It is extremely simple. Don't be afraid. We are more than welcoming you in our the Russian Dude community. So go ahead and, if you don't mind, like this video and subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram. The weekend is here, so you can see how I live outside of YouTube. The link is down below. But okay, now let's get serious and talk about Putin's new best friend giving him a present. Then we'll go to the south, where the self-destruction of Russian forces continues, and we'll finalize everything in the east, where Russian resistance crossed the border and humiliated the FSB officers. And so yes, the best friend of Putin I'm talking about is North Korea, who looks like allegedly sent the artillery systems to Russia recently. And I do not know which kind of war Putin has in his mind, where he captures Kiev in 3 days and everything goes according to the plan, when you have to ask for help from North Korea. But let's leave it as it is. But then we have the statement from the Ukrainian so-called army of drones, which is sending 2,000 more artificial intelligence drones to the Ukrainian front lines, which will cause a significant disruption in the Russian forces, because once again, besides them being unmanned aerial vehicles, they once again also have artificial intelligence, which basically means in case the control over this drone is lost, it will still potentially be able to fulfill its combat tasks. And just to show how incredibly useful these specific drones are, in just last week alone, reportedly, 220 pieces of Russian military equipment was destroyed thanks to these drones. Then we have the statement from NATO, which claims that next year they want to do a mass training close to the borders of Russia, including up to 40,000 soldiers, and the goal of this training will be how to repel the potential aggression from Russia. Once again, Putin, your goal of not letting the NATO expand kinda failed, to say the least. And ultimately we do have some good news from Slovakia, because its president Zuzana Čaputova, when a couple of days ago she said that probably her country will stop assisting Ukraine, now she said that, okay, we recognize this as a mistake, we will resume our assistance to this country. And so yes, now as promised, let's quickly go to the south of Ukraine, where Putin sacrifices soldiers just to buy himself a little bit more time, and then we'll finalize everything in the east. And first of all, we just have to make a stop in one of Odessa ports, which recently once again has been attacked by Russian missiles. So yeah, just remember this specific event and many others which happened previously, whenever next time Putin says that he actually cares about grain supplies to the world, and this is what Russians do pretty much every other day. But luckily, according to the Ukrainians, their air defense was able to intercept 25 out of 33 Russian aerial targets in the last 24 hours. But on the other hand, Ukrainians continue to precisely target and destroy military objects of Russians, such as for example from this video from Zaporozhye front line, where a Russian truck called KAMAZ was bringing a lot of supplies, such as ammunition and arms, to the front lines, and has been successfully targeted and eliminated by Ukrainians using GML-RS missile. Next we have a very interesting story from Melitopol, where a local partisan woman was able to poison 11 Russian soldiers with a very bad quality alcohol. Most likely it was vodka, being the irresistible temptation for Russian Z soldiers. Then we refer to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, which claims that Ukrainians have relative success next to Rabotny, Novoprokopivka and Verbovia frontline, but at the same time we have British intelligence report, which refers to the mayor of Melitopol, Ivan Fedorov, and he claims that Russians are actively preparing for Ukrainians storming this specific frontline. First of all, he mentions that to the south of Novoprokopivka, Russians are digging two-story underground bunkers with a very complex network of underground tunnels and trenches, and then also something similar is happening around Tokmak, with specifically Russians focusing on trenches, and they even put concrete at the bottom, which basically signals that they are preparing for the bad weather, because winter is coming. But the best part about it is that whenever Ukrainians inevitably will recapture these territories, they will be able to use these defenses to their own advantage. But then we have another British intelligence report which came to us a little bit earlier, which tells us that Russians do not stop their attempts to recapture lost ground in Rabotny frontline. But this is the most important thing, is that the commanders, they literally sent unprepared troops with lack of artillery support or with almost no military vehicle support at all. And obviously Ukrainians, they're easily able to eliminate these advancing unprotected forces. And guess what? Obviously these commands to the Russian officers, they come from above, most likely from Putin himself. So basically what it means is that he literally sacrifices Russian soldiers just to buy himself a little bit more time and come up with another crazy idea. Because yes, whenever Russians are attacking, no matter how ridiculous and unprotected these attacks are or how stupid they are, Ukrainians at that time are not able to advance themselves. So let's see how long Russian officers will be sending waves after waves after waves after waves after waves of Russian troops just trying to halt the Ukrainian counteroffensive. And well, I guess what people say at this point is whenever your enemy is making a mistake, don't interfere with them. I guess perfect phrase. Okay, now let's go to the east of Ukraine, where I'll give you an update about the combat activities there, and also about Russian resistance crossing the border and engaging in combat activities with Putin's soldiers. And specifically what I'm talking about here is that the Freedom of Russia Legion entered once again Belgorod region, engaged in combat activities with including FSB officers, and reportedly eliminated 13 of them and wounded 5 of them. The losses of the Freedom of Russia Legion at this point are estimated to be at 0. The full version of this cross-border raid will be available on my Patreon, and if you don't mind, just go ahead and check it for yourself, which other benefits my Patreon offers to you, such as, for example, fully uncensored episodes of The Russian Dude, early access, premium chat, and extra footage. The link is down below. This is one of the best way to support the channel, and there is also 1 week of free access for you to see if you like it or not. And what do you think was the response by Putin for this raid and many other combat activities, successful ones by Ukrainians in the past? Well, as always, he did what he does the best. The city center of Kharkiv has been recently attacked by Russians. There are civilian, unfortunately, casualties, and a lot of people are wounded. Once again, this is the city center. There is not a single military object located right there. The only buildings which were affected were residential buildings. And I never believed that Putin went to Ukraine to protect Ukrainians. But with events like this, my faith in that this is not what he's doing in Ukraine, it just becomes even more and more. I don't think that more people in the world, they still think that Putin actually fights something good in Ukraine. But let me know in the comments what do you think. And hopefully even some Russian soldiers, they started to see the true nature of Putin, because reportedly more and more Russian soldiers, they refuse to follow orders. So let's talk about this right now. But first of all, let's quickly refer to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, which mentions that Russians and Ukrainians continue to engage in combat activities along Kupiansk-Svatove-Kreminna front line, but neither of the sides were able to make any significant advancements so far. We do have this very interesting picture from the Kreminna forest area, which shows Ukrainians standing on the outskirts. So this might be just a small detachment or a separate unit, but as you can see, they're able to advance pretty deep behind the actual front lines. Next we have another picture from Luhansk region, which shows at least 10 destroyed Russian tanks, including the most modern ones, T-90Ms, along with other destroyed military vehicles. And all of this equipment is only scattered across 2 square kilometers, which basically shows that Russians, they still continue to try to capture some land, and absolutely nothing happens except them losing a lot of materials, equipment and forces. But then we have even more. For example, right here is the video of Ukrainians using its own reconnaissance drone called Shark and finding the position of Russians and their small command post. And then by using these coordinates, they're able to completely obliterate these positions using HIMARS. Then we get closer to Bakhmut, and Ukrainians reportedly were able to destroy a pretty big assault group of Russians along with their military vehicles next to Kodyma. And as we refer once again to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainians resumed their intense offensive and advancement next to Klishivka and Andriivka, and are getting extremely close to the railway, which leads all the way to the south of Bakhmut. But at the same time, there are even more and more reports recently coming specifically from the east, from areas such as Bakhmut and then also Kupiansk-Svatove-Kreminna frontline, that more and more Russian soldiers, they simply refuse to follow orders of their commanders, because obviously for 2 reasons. The reason number 1, it is because they try to do the offensive as they have been doing in the last several months, yielding no results. And reason number 2, potentially and hopefully, is that they see what Putin does in Ukraine. So they probably, at least I hope, sincerely hope, that they see that this war is not for them. This is the war of Putin. As we go a little bit to the south, to the small settlement to the south of Vuhledar called Yegorivka, Ukrainians were also able to destroy a Russian tank along with the assault group. And just believe it or not, but yet another Russian fighter jet has been intercepted by their own air defense system next to Mariupol. So as you can see, hopefully more and more Russians, they started to see the true nature of Putin. Russian commanders, they do not really care about their own forces and they sacrifice them just to buy a little bit more time. Russians themselves, they intercept their own fighter jets, and then there is Russian resistance which crosses the borders and fights against the followers of Putin. So all of this hopefully in the end, in the very near future, hopefully it will all turn against Putin himself. So I'll be obviously closely following this war until it ends, and if you don't want to miss any of the crucial updates in the near future, just please consider subscribing to my channel. It only takes one click. Thank you so much, patrons, for your support, and see you on Tuesday.